The NFL draft is past, and now we turn our attention back fully to college football, but not before we investigate how Pete Thamel unwinds, and also Ryan Day, head coach of the reigning national champion Ohio State Buckeyes, who had 14 players go into the NFL draft over the last few days, will join us as a guest. This is the College Game Day podcast. We are recording on Wednesday, April 30th. Rece Davis and Pete Thamel with you. Ryan Day will join us shortly. So, Pete, I think one of the most fascinating things about any podcast is there's a little chit-chat prior to the beginning of the podcast. And look, we understand that when we do the draft, we cover college football and college basketball. We're not breaking rocks. We're not digging ditches. We're not deep in coal mines. But some relaxation is in order. So tell me, Pete, after a long season of covering college football, covering college basketball, covering the NFL draft, extraordinary work, being out in the cold, scarf wrapped around your neck in stylish fashion. Tell me, how is it that once Pete Thamel returns to Boston, that he tries to make sure to recharge? I think people would be interested in this.
Yeah, it's really not interesting at all. But I do spend a lot of time with little Teddy Thamel, my 3-year-old, and obviously my wife. But yeah, take Teddy, do like routine things when the routine is gone. Trying to
don't bury the lead, Pete. Don't bury the lead, Pete.
So on Monday, I took the day off, Rece, and I went to, I got a massage in the morning. I went to hot yoga at noon, and I tried to sweat out all of the sins, meaning the snacks readily available for the last 7 months of filming things, and trying to unwind my lack of discipline, which is obvious and relentless, and appears every week wherever our studio is set up.
What's the snack that you can't resist? When we go in, there's a snack table out. What is the one that you go, ugh?
It could be a long answer, but it's those little like dot pretzels for some reason. You know what I'm talking about? Like the red bag, I think it's dots. And then I can always trick myself because if it's like fake healthy, so the like peanuts and cashews with the M&Ms in the like little
with the M&Ms. I was gonna say there's nothing wrong with healthy peanuts M&Ms. And cashews, and with the M&Ms that changes things.
It's like the trail mix.
Oh, trail mix. Okay, I got you.
The trail mix that they'll throw an M&M in there or two. So that's what I go to. What's your vice, Rece?
Well, all of them. I mean, I love sweets, as you know. I've got a sweet tooth, but I do want to tell you about an extraordinary display of willpower by the snack table during the draft.
Wow!
So I come in, and you walk in, and I think I have a coffee, and I think I don't like to be full before we go on. So I either don't eat or eat very lightly. But I walk in, and I look at, and there is one singular, last one left, Little Debbie oatmeal cream pie, which I know Nick Saban's famous for eating those, but I've been pulling off at gas stations for 40 years, picking those things up. So I love
They were a lot more readily available this year on Game Day than previous year.
You know what? In fact, they'd never shown up. They'd never, ever, ever, ever been on the snack table until Nick joined us. So there's one left, right? And I'm looking and I'm going, he'd never know. He'd never know. And I thought, but you know what? If he wants us, I'll leave it. So I think I didn't get anything. And then later he comes in and he eats it. And so I tell him, I said, I left that for you. And you know what he said? I saw yesterday there was only one left, and he said, and I wondered if somebody would take it from me. So it was, and they didn't, They left it for him. So anyway, but yeah,
we all know our roles. You don't want to be the one that eats the last Little Debbie and gets thrown off the ship.
Yeah, no, because you would have never ever heard the end of it
ever
either. By the way, I think the other thing from the draft that was interesting. When do you think the last time Nick rode in a car? Anything similar to your rental car?
Oh,
that you, me, Nick, and Jimmy Guerrero went to breakfast in on. What day was that? Friday?
Yeah, it was definitely Friday. Definitely Friday morning. I think all business travelers can relate to this moment, Rece. So usually at bigger airports, when you rent a car, I have national, so you go pick your car, right? So at least you're like safe. But when you go to the smaller, like the Green Bay airport reminds me of the Gainesville airport, or, you know what I mean? There's some of these smaller airports that we end up popping into, and you don't go get to choose your car. You wait in line and you get your keys. South Bend Airport comes to mind. Anyway, they throw me the keys to my car. I got a mid-size SUV. I actually flew into Madison, with about the same size. And then Madison, by the way, there's a huge cheese refrigerator in like the Hudson News in the airport. I was like, never change Madison, just all filled with cheese. It's just a cheese on it. And they throw me the keys and I walk out and you know, you're looking for it, you hit the button and it is just this like electric blue. I described to my wife as like the color of like Gatorade Zero, you know, like that, like it was just like a blue.
That's about right.
This is a car nobody would ever buy. And I'm like, wow, this is embarrassing. Good thing nobody's going to see me in this. And then we all decided to go to breakfast, and I pulled the car around because it's raining, and
you were the only one with the car, by the way. Let's clarify that. Yeah.
Yes, and Nick Saban just ripped me the entire morning. Like, don't buy that car.
Yeah, if they took that in on trade for some reason, that's one of those that doesn't go to the lot; it goes straight to the auction. You know,
they give you 3 little Debbies for that car.
Yeah. So did you enjoy the draft? I understand that there was some reaction to a moment I had after you guys had left the draft on Saturday.
Certainly, I enjoyed the draft. I love the draft. It was awesome. Had a great time. Certainly, the Shedeur Sanders story, Rece, was like a once a decade, just stunning, incomprehensible kind of thing. Now, it makes sense, and we can walk through it and unpack it, but it was just one of those, like, while it was happening, you know, in the second round, you're like, oh, he'll go by the, you know, and then all of a sudden it was like, well, maybe we won't go to 83. And then after 83, you're like, someone's going to have it. And it just kept like snowballing and snowballing. And it snowballed right into day 3 of the draft, where it was clearly, you know, the biggest story in sports, and it transcended sports and led to like what I thought was a pretty compelling and authentic interaction between you and our friend Mel.
Here's the thing. Let's get this out of the way first. I love Mel Kiper. And he and I think, are very friendly and fond of one another. A large reason, if not the primary reason, that there were 380,000 people or whatever the final count was in Green Bay at the NFL draft, following the NFL draft, just because of Mel Kiper. Mel Kiper's job is to make evaluations and stand behind them. He's done this for decades now. So it's not surprising that if he values Shedeur Sanders at a certain level and he hasn't been chosen, then, you know, he's going to stand on the table. Zero problem with that. And I felt as if on the set in that moment that we were discounting the most likely explanation for why this was happening. And it was that something happened in the pre-draft process. Now, I think 2 things happened. One, I don't think, in my judgment, watching the tape, for whatever you want to make of that, whether you think I have qualified eyes to watch the tape or not, I don't think he's a top 5 pick right now. It doesn't mean he won't wind up being a top 5 quarterback. As we always say, people are allowed to improve. Do think it was first round tape, late first round, early second round, for sure. I don't think there's any doubt about that, at least to me, and at least to my point. So why didn't it happen? All right. The most likely thing is that something happened and we got little snippets of this in the pre-interview process that they didn't like, that they didn't want to associate with it. Most teams did not. The Browns ended up deciding they would. And I didn't feel like the discussion was giving that credence. I felt as if it was all becoming, this is outrageous, this is terrible, this is horrible. It's happened to other people before. Now, Shedeur is a bigger star than it has happened to most people in the past. But you have a great saying. You have a great saying that you told me you picked up from Pete Gillen, the longtime basketball coach. You have to be better than your problems. I always used to use it, and I almost hesitate to use this because this has nothing to do with Shedeur. My buddy Jim Herrick, the basketball coach, used to say, and again, let me emphasize, nothing to do with Shedeur. He would say, some guys can smoke dope, some guys can't. You know, meaning if you were a star, like if you were a star, you could get away with things. Shedeur, zero of anything like that. I want to make that perfectly clear. It's another way of saying you have to be bigger than your problems. So the most likely explanation for what was happening was that the NFL didn't think that the tape, the demeanor, the leadership, the vibe, the personality whatever it was bigger than their concerns. If it had been, then they would have taken him. And I thought that was the most likely explanation. And it wasn't that they don't know what they were seeing or whatever. Reasonable minds can differ. Mm-hmm. Now, the next thing that comes about is this like Mel Kiper versus me kind of thing. And I told you that like in the break, we're still, it wasn't an act. It was true. He felt that way. I felt the way I said.
Not one of the toughest quarterbacks you know.
But Mel, this isn't about this isn't about quarterback traits and quarterback characteristics, personal football character. That's not about this. This is personal.
Has he had an off the field issue? No, he has not.
Mel, you don't have to sell it to me.
No, I don't know what we're talking about here.
You're right. You're right. Yes, you're right. But you know what? But Mel, the draft has spoken.
That's right. That's the key, Mel. It's not putting a value judgment on whether those who passed were right or wrong. They did. Yep. So now, whenever you're in circumstances in life, whether you like them, whether you don't like them, whether they're fair or whether they're unfair, you might have to deal with them.
That's right.
And now Shedeur Sanders has to deal with
everything.
And for whatever reason, whether he played a minute, microscopic percentage, 0%, or it's a legitimate criticism of the way he conducted himself during the draft process, this was the result.
Yeah.
Now he has an opportunity to answer it. I think yelling at the NFL about it is not productive.
There's not a quarterback. Boomer Esiason was not happy when he was a second-round pick.
Tom Brady was not happy.
They dropped. How'd they turn out?
And you know what?
My point, nobody's arguing that can happen.
Rece, the NFL has been clueless for 50 years when it comes to evaluating quarterback. Clueless. No idea what they're doing in terms of evaluating quarterback. That's proof. There's proof of that.
How many
times they say we know exactly what we're talking about with quarterback? They don't.
People can disagree and still be very fond of each other and still like each other and still be laughing and joking in between sets, during the commercial breaks, and we were. And at the end, Mel's not a touchy-feely kind of guy, but we, kind of shook hands, half hugged on the way out. But it wasn't because, hey, let's make up over disagreeing over the draft position of Shedeur Sanders. It was more because, hey, we worked the draft together the last few years. We like each other. We get along. We enjoy working together. But for whatever reason, we probably won't lay eyes on each other until the 2026 NFL draft. So it was like, hey, I hope everything's great and, enjoy living, living in, I think, Delaware, Maryland, wherever Mel lives there on the coast. Enjoy yourself, go out, fish, whole thing. And, there's no animosity whatsoever.
So you guys hugged it out, Rece?
I guess so, but I mean, it's as much as you do with Mel. Mel's not a hugger, that's it. But it's
fair.
It was something that when you host a show, there are times you have to know your lane. I'm not going to argue with Nick Saban about proper footwork for a cornerback. That's absurd. But we can argue over whether a coach should have been fired, whether it was wise to go for it on 4th and 7 from your own 28, whatever it might be. Those types of things are fair game. Draft position of Shedeur Sanders with your analyst and reasons for it, if you in your judgment as the host, they're not being fully evaluated. That's the area you should go into. That's the spot you pick. I mean, and I've done this. I try to pick my spots. I've done this with every analyst I've ever had. I've gotten into it with just about all of them. But you're not mad at them. At the end, it never becomes personal or anything. So I was sort of bemused by some of the text I was getting during the draft, because as you know, I am on social media. I post some, I do some things, but you mentioned a lot of times I do my best not to live on it. I'm not sitting there checking. I'm
so jealous.
I'm not
That's why I mention it all the time.
Checking the mentions while I'm doing a show. I'm trying to do the show, Yeah. And so But I do have Slack open, I have text open, because you're great. You might text me something I need to know. The Slack channel that we have for the draft, there are things that I might need to know that are happening. Whether it's our researcher, Marissa Dowling, or Brian Beasley, who works with us on the draft, or Mike Allen, who's one of our news editors. Look, I have my phone, but I'm not diving into social media, seeing what people are saying about whatever it is we just said. And, I'm getting all of these reactions, and it was sort of amusing because, I mean, Mel's a legend. He's entitled to his opinion. He's been really right about a lot of things in the draft, and he's been really wrong, just like everybody else, just like the NFL, just like me, just like everybody else. And, you just have to provide, as the host, you have to do your best to provide some balance and pick your spots to push back. Because I'm doing, am I doing it because I feel that way? Always. I'll never present a view I don't believe as mine.
Sure.
I might present a view that, hey, what about this that is not necessarily mine?
Devil's advocate.
In order to provide some balance. In this case, I presented my view, but I think it's really important. It's really important to do so. But I'm doing it for the analysts first and foremost, because sometimes they need to back up / justify their positions. Sure. Sometimes they need to be told, I think you might be wrong here. Other times it's like, okay, I don't agree. You might be right, but I feel like you need to back it up. And, so that's all of those things go into it. You do it in the moment. Nobody planned it. It just sort of happened that way. But if you're wondering, Mel and I are great. I mean, he's awesome. He's an awesome human being. He's an awesome guy. He doesn't eat in front of people, and he eats pumpkin pie in an unusual fashion. But he's a tremendous human being.
Well, that is a good coda to the draft, and let's bring on Ryan Day.
And so that's that for the way Mel Kiper eats pumpkin pie, and I assure all of you, Mel Kiper and I are on great terms, just as we have always been on great terms. I mentioned earlier in the podcast, Ohio State had 14 players selected in the NFL draft from their national championship team. We are delighted to be joined by the head coach of the Buckeyes, Ryan Day. Ryan, we're going to get off the draft quickly. What's the draft like for you when you have the number of players selected that you guys did?
Exciting. Yeah. To watch guys who, this class really was the first class that we saw all the way from recruiting all the way to the end. And it started with Jack Sawyer, really was the first one to commit in that class. And then it went all the way, to this year. So to see them finish their goals on the field, but now going into the NFL prepared. And that's something we talk about a lot here. It's a lot easier to get to the NFL. It's harder to stay in the NFL. And so we wanted to make sure that they had the right fit, and the place that they get drafted gets a lot of attention. But we were excited about the fit for our guys, and we're excited about all 14 guys who got drafted, and then the 3 guys that went undrafted who signed as well afterwards.
Ryan, this is the first year that I remember you being the head coach, not going to the draft, and I think you might have even gone as an assistant too. Just you guys have had an assembly line of first round picks. This is a bit of a weird draft. Less coaches came, and you didn't happen to have any players who went to Green Bay. Just walk us through how you consumed it. Did you sit on the couch and sit back and just kind of watch it like a normal American?
Yeah, that was the way it was during COVID when that draft happened, which was very unique, obviously. But this was the first time, other than COVID, where we watched it at home the first round, and then that was exactly it. We went at home and was with the family and watched it all unfold, which was really exciting and really cool. Now it gets late into the night, so you start watching the rest of the draft through your toes in bed, but. But we had a great group text. We put all the guys, including Mick, on a group text. And so we just continued throughout the whole weekend to talk to each other, encourage each other, congratulate the guys that got drafted, a little banter back and forth. So it was great. And then, into Friday and Saturday.
What's an example of something, an interaction in public, something you've done? What's an example of something that has changed for you or has been different since you're now a national championship head coach, at least during the offseason here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I look at it from a couple different perspectives. I think the first thing that now that I've had a chance to reflect and go through it, you have a certain mindset of what it would be like when you win a national championship. And then when you actually go through it, what it's really like. And I think the first thing for me is that when you're a first-time head coach at a place like Ohio State, There's a lot that comes with that. And then also just having, a young family going through that process for the first time. So, when you look at the guys who have come before, most of them had been a head coach before. Most of them had kids who were older. So this was just, and all the changes that have come with the last, 6 years. And so unique. And, I don't necessarily think you get the benefit of the doubt until you win one. And I think now that you win one, you get a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt. And, we'll see as we move forward. We still got a lot of runway here. But, I think that's probably, how you come out of it thinking to yourself, okay, this is something that we can really hang our hat on and testimony to all the hard work we've put in, what we've done building our culture and putting on the field. But on the other side of that, it's like, I think you have to look to see what do you consider success? And if your goal is to win national championships, once you win one, it's like, okay, now what do you do? I guess you can go chase another one. But, for me, that was never really why I got into coaching. And when you're at a place like Ohio State, you have to win every game and you have to win championships. Otherwise, they find another coach. So that's just the prerequisite for the job. But winning just allows us an opportunity to continue to make an impact on young people's lives. And that's what college football is all about. And so in a time when there has a lot of change and, there seems to be chaos, that's not the goal. So when the national championship's over and the confetti falls, you're still moving because your goal is just to continue to make an impact on people's lives. And that's what we're doing. New journey this year, new group of guys. And so, new story. And so that's kind of the yin and the yang of kind of how I felt over the last couple of months.
Can you go out to dinner in Columbus now? And if so, how is that?
Every year it's become a little bit more amplified, I guess, is probably the best way to put it. I think it is real that you have to have a plan. There's 2 million people in the city of Columbus. I think the people who are closest to me and my family get numb to it. So, it's okay. The places that I try to frequent, the kids' games, different places that we'll go to eat. And after a while, people get used to it. It's usually when we go outside of that circle where you just have to have a plan in place. People are great. But, the one thing that people ask me all the time, like, what's the biggest change from when you became an assistant coach to a head coach and now at Ohio State is pictures. Like, it's just amazing, like how much, just wherever you go, people want pictures. And so, you just try to be gracious as you can, especially with young people or fans. But it just comes with a job. And just one thing for sure, though, is, asking my wife to take the picture of somebody is usually not going to go very well. So I try to get out in front of that pretty good. So, but no, it's great, and people are great as well. I mean, they're just they're excited. They're excited about the season, and the biggest feedback, no matter where we are, whether in Ohio or across the country, is people just say thank you. Thanks for the season, thanks for the memories, thanks for sticking with the team and the resilience. And there's just so many things that they have great memories over.
So one of the cool ripples from winning the title, Ryan, was you get to go on Jimmy Fallon. That's not something like it transcends sports a little bit, just a different experience. I don't want to speak for Rece. I've never been on one of those, the Tonight Show. I don't think Rece ever has been.
No.
What's that like? Like, would you go in with there other celebrities there? That had to be just kind of a neat day.
Yeah. Intimidating. For sure. completely out my element. You think about being in a press conference post game or playing in front of 20 million people on TV, and you wouldn't think that you'd be that worked up, but in that environment, that's a whole different world. And those folks they're professionals at what they do. Just like you guys do on game day. It's a different setting than a press conference or a team. And being at 30 Rock in New York City was a great experience. And what I didn't realize was how, Kelly Clarkson's right here, right across the hallway is Jimmy Fallon. And then, SNL's right down the hallway. Like, they're all right there. And you have the dressing rooms and, hair and makeup. And I was like, well, I'm good, but I'm sure my wife may want some. And so Nina went in there. Like, we made an experience out of it. Yeah, it was really cool. And the other thing that was amazing was how many Buckeyes were in that building. People there's a lot of people that, as you guys know, work hard to put those shows on. There's so many scenes, but so many Ohio State Buckeyes. So just to see them all come and get around the trophy and take pictures was great.
Who's the greatest late night host of all time? Is it Fallon? Is it Letterman? Is it old school Carson? Is it Leno? Who is it?
Yeah, I probably watched Letterman the most when I was younger. It's hard for me to say who the best was. I didn't go on any of those. I guess I got to say Jimmy Fallon because
there you go.
Yeah, and he's probably the closest to my heart because he has a lake house in my home state of New Hampshire. So yeah, and I think he named his child after the lake, Winnie. So I'm going to say Jimmy Fallon. Go on record because I've been on his show and he couldn't have been more gracious.
Are you guys going to hang out at the lake in New Hampshire now?
Probably not, but but it was a lot of fun being on the show. He really was great, great personality. And I think the thing that I appreciated was that he allowed me to kind of feel comfortable in that setting. It wasn't intimidating, and that's a sign of a great host.
Did Adam Sandler go to your high school? That we're going on a pop culture rabbit hole here. Am I right about that?
Yeah. So Chip, myself, and Adam Sandler all went to Central High School in Manchester.
All right.
Yeah.
That's they could do a pretty good reunion fundraiser if they brought everybody back, I would think.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing. We all kind of grew up, and my wife too, all kind of within a mile radius of each other.
Do you know Adam?
Like secondhand. We've met before.
Okay.
When I was young and he was kind of coming up, and those first few movies started coming out. And then my father-in-law taught him at Central. So my father-in-law was a social studies teacher and he had him as a student. So, indirectly, we're all friendly. One time I went by his house when I was in middle school and he was shooting hoops. And that was one of the experiences we had together. I went in and shot hoops with him for a little while. And at the time he had this tape out. You guys probably don't remember this, but it was Toll Booth Willie, and so I made him.
I remember Toll Booth Willie. Yeah. I mean, I'm a masshole, as Rece thinks is an insult. I call it a compliment. Yeah. I remember Toll Booth. I literally remember listening to the cassette actually.
Welcome to Worcester. $1.25, please.
Hey, how you doing, Toll Booth Willie?
Good. Thanks for asking, Pop.
That's it. And so that was around that time, but he was a good basketball player.
I want to talk transfer portal. You said something really interesting the other day about bringing guys into the portal. And I hear all of these coaches complain everything's transactional. Guys want money. You can't build relationships. And you said if the first thing players are talking about is how much money can I make, that Ohio State is probably not the place for you. Ohio State has the benefit of probably being able to be selective in that regard. But when it comes to late portal additions, which you've had one recently, what's that interaction like? How quickly do you get to know someone who might be available to you, and both for your sake and their sake, they have to make a pretty quick decision?
Yeah, well, I think the money's, in the NIL situations are very much involved with it nowadays. That's a piece of it. But I don't think we can complain that it's transactional if that's the first thing that we're leading with. And I think that whether it's coaches or players, it's still college. It's not the NFL. So, these guys are still in some of the most formidable years of their lives. And so the development that, is possible during 18, 19, 20, 21. You look at Will Howard in just 1 year, you look at how he developed. You look at a guy like Travion Henderson from when he was a freshman all the way to his fourth year. There's this development. So sure, money is part of it, but if these guys are trying to become the most elite players in the world and play on the biggest stage, and then not only make it to the NFL, but have a career in the NFL and stay in the NFL, then we believe Ohio State is the right place. Again, I try to say all the time when I start these recruiting conversations, Ohio State is not for everybody, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that's who we are. And so, we want guys who care about relationships, want to be the best in the world at what they do. And also, of course, you're going to have an opportunity to make money here. And I think that's probably the thing as we look back on last year on our team. There was so much talk about this $20 million, and it was something that it's like a lightning bolt. But the truth is the majority of the guys who came back were guys that were in the program for a long time. These guys who got drafted, the exceptions were Quinshon and Will. But when you look at the guys who just got drafted, those are all guys that have been homegrown. They've been here the whole time. I think the value of being an Ohio State football player because of the brand, because of the market, and because of our fan base, it's high. And it's not like you just go out and buy the best players in the country. We're bringing these guys up, we're developing them, and then the market that's being created is allowing them to make a bunch of money while they're here. And so we try to look at it through that lens, because I think stability now is more important than ever, knowing that we all know the money's part of it. But it's more about the development. And we believe here that we can develop as good, if not better, than anybody in the country when it comes to NFL players.
Well, you have two guys on your roster, Ryan, who will be featured players in the next two drafts, in Caleb Downs and Jeremiah Smith. And we could throw Sonny Styles in there too, because certainly he'll be a great prospect. Come next year, probably would have been a high pick this year. Is it a challenge as a coach to talk about development, to keep guys like that engaged on the path when they've made a lot of money, when they know, where their future is, maybe a little more linear fashion than others? How do you handle it's a first world problem, but how do you handle guys like that whose future seems so set, to keep them engaged day to day and focused on development?
Well, they're motivated because they want to win, and you have your individual goals, but then they have to overlap with the team goals. And I give guys like Caleb and Jeremiah, Sonny, Carnell Tate, these guys a lot of credit. IGB. The first thing that when we got together after the season, we went through our goals, and the first one was reinforce the culture. And they said, no, we got to rebuild the culture, because there's guys in this team that don't know our culture. And they asked to have a lot of the national championship paraphernalia around the building that was just put up taken down, because they're like, we didn't win a national championship. We're not defending national champs. We're not defending anything, because they're not going to take the trophy away. We're trying to win a championship, And so that was the words out of their mouth. So I knew that they had the right mindset on this thing. They're high achievers. They have goals in college. They know what they want to get done, certainly in the NFL, but they know they can continue to get better. They want to win multiple championships, and they want to become great. And I think, it's important to make sure we provide them with a staff that they feel like they're getting better every day. So, a guy like Caleb, when he walks in a building and works with Matt Guerreri and Tim Walton and Matt Patricia, he knows he's getting better every day because he feels that. For Jeremiah and Carnell and those guys, Brian and myself, we're surrounding them with as much information as we can to help them get better. And as long as they feel like they're getting better every time they walk into the Woody, then you have that mindset of there's a purpose.
You and I spoke the morning after the national championship about the impact of winning that title and the impact it would have on your voice as one of the leaders of the sport. You've laid out your vision very clearly for how things work at Ohio State. Speaking more broadly from college football, because I think that some of the things you're reinforcing and have successfully, others are finding it more difficult to do. How should this work, Ryan, in terms of whether it's collective bargaining, transfer portal? What should the framework look like in your judgment?
Well, I think it all starts with enforcement. And I've said this for a long time, that until we have an enforcement arm put into place, we're always going to be working sideways. I feel like before we set a rule, before we do anything, we have to put a structure in place where we can enforce rules on and off the field. And until that happens, we'll still be in this scenario that we're in. I think once we get that done, then we can start building a structure where we set rules, we set guidelines, and then we can build. But until that happens, like people are talking about, the revenue share, and then we have this clearinghouse. Mm-hmm. Well, if the clearinghouse doesn't have any teeth, or if there's still going to be things that go on behind the scenes that we can enforce, then we're still just kidding ourselves. And there's always going to be this feeling that, somebody else is getting away with something, or we're trying to find the loophole in the system. That's sort of the environment that we've created, and a culture that okay, what's the rule? How do we get around it? And that's just not good. Mm-hmm. And when I talk to NFL folks, they just kind of roll their eyes. Man, how do you guys continue to live in this world? And I try to look at it whether it's, somebody on Wall Street or, somebody in the medical field or the insurance. There's always going to be changes, and there's people who after work are going to have a beer and complaining about their industry because the natural order of the world is chaos. So you have to embrace it, but like ours couldn't be more chaotic. I mean, it is certainly crazy. So to me, we got to have enforcement in place, and you got to give them power to make decisions and hold people accountable, because otherwise this is just anarchy. Now that being said, I do believe that there should be one transfer portal in the spring only. I think for us to try to do a transfer portal, like for instance, we had the transfer portal open and close before our season was even over. Like, how do you even explain that? And then the transfer portal is open for our guys for 5 days after we're done with our last game. So the only people that are available is Notre Dame and Ohio State players, where people can go and just go bid on them. And so we lost 7 players when that happened. And so now you get into the spring portal, and here's a whole nother conversation. And so if the contracts are going to happen because of the revenue share from July to June or June to May or however we end up deciding on that, then that's when the portal should be open, in my opinion. It just makes sense to have one portal window. And I think if we can at least get that done, we're at least making progress. If we get the enforcement done, one transfer portal window, and then at least we're moving in the right direction.
So, Ryan, Ohio State is a $100 million business. College football is a multi-billion-dollar business. Can you put in perspective trying to run your business, starting late July for the next business cycle, for lack of a better way to put it, with no rules or structure set in place yet?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, sort of how we feel like we've been operating for the last couple of years. Just even most recently with this 105 conversation, we have meetings after the spring with each individual player. And so, we've been told, well, the roster is going to have to get trimmed to 105. We've been hearing this for months. So you look at the 105 and you try to have real conversations with players, because to pull the rug out from underneath them after preseason camp without any kind of a heads up, it's not right. That's not how you treat people. And so, you have these conversations with folks. And so, you give them the opportunity to go in the portal to check out their options. And then you hear, well, maybe the 105 is going to play. Yeah. So it's like, this is just sort of how we're trying to work through it. And is it frustrating? Yes. But what we're not going to do is just throw up our hands and walk away. We're just going to keep trying to push through it, knowing that the more change and the more chaos there is, the more you have to fall back on timeless principles of loyalty, of integrity, of resilience, communication, humility, like all the things that we've known have stood the test of time. And so that's what we're going to
do. Who should be in charge of the enforcement and making the rules? NCAA, college football playoff, as an entity expanding into that realm and it being just college football? Who should do that?
Yeah, I mean, I know we're on this format, and we're just talking about my opinions. As you're asking my thoughts, and this is my thoughts, and I'm sure other people have different opinions. There's two things there. I think when you look at the NFL, the first thing when there's one commissioner who makes the decision, when the commissioner walks out, what's the first thing everybody does at the draft? They boo. Why do they boo? Well, because they always feel like they're getting the short end of the stick. I mean, and that's how it works. So in an environment of college football where people are coming from so many different areas of the country, different state laws, size of universities, public, private, there's just so many different, angles that people are coming at, politics get involved with it. So to have one person, I think is not good. To me, the thing that would make sense is to have 3 people, just like checks and balances, like in the U.S. government. That way, anytime a decision has to be made, it's either unanimous or it's 2-1, as opposed to just one person making a decision. And I think that structure at least gives us a chance. But in terms of the enforcement arm, I think it has to be a third party. I think when you look at Wall Street and the way that they built the SEC, they knew they had to do something, and that was governmental. And I don't know if we can do something with the government, but something has to be done at a third party that does the enforcement, that has real teeth, that can go in and check phone records and go into bank, really have teeth. Because if you can't, you're still going to be in the same position you're in. And college football has been now built up to a point where it's a $1 billion business where 20, 30 years ago it was huge, but the money wasn't there. Now the money's at play, and I think we need to make sure that that's in place.
Congratulations on the first Security Exchange Commission reference on SEC on the College Game Day podcast. So
he was on a roll. I wasn't going to step in and say, by the way, Security Exchange Commission.
People are going to accuse us of having a Security and Exchange Commission bias now, Ryan, because we're talking about the SEC.
Southeastern Conference. I'm a Northeast guy, so when I hear this, I don't necessarily think of football.
But transition a little bit. It ties into the future of college football. For all the 5 stars you're recruiting right now, the most important recruit on your mind is RJ Day, your son. I'm looking at his recruiting profile here. 6'1" quarterback, St. Francis de Sales High School, I believe Luke Fickell's alma mater. He is a class of 2027 quarterback. Has a nice offer list here that ranges through the MAC, Toledo, got Boston College in there, Kent Marshall in there, Miami of Ohio. I've talked to a lot of coaches over the years who've had their kids go through the recruiting process, Ryan, and they feel like it's kind of changed the way they've looked at some things a little bit. What's it been like for RJ, and what's it been like for you to live this process now as a parent?
Yeah, I think the thing that's been great is, if you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, or, an insurance salesman, you can't bring your son to work very often. So we've been able to share a lot of time together. And as fast as this is going and has gone, knowing that he's going to be in college in 2 years, I mean, it's like terrifying. He's my best friend. And so he comes into Woody all the time. He's, at games with me, and we're able to share this game of football together. He's obsessed with the game. And so that's been really cool. I think the other part is just as a dad, now going through this process and then seeing the kids that we're recruiting the same age as him, at the end of the day, when we go on these recruiting visits, like I don't really care about the facilities or the weight room or anything like that. I just want to know who's going to help raise my son. Who are the men that are going to be around to help them become a better football player, but a better man off the field that's actually going to care about him. And I think that makes us all better coaches when you look at it like that. And that's the truth, because you can say it, but until you really go through it, it's different. And then the last part is, a quarterback nowadays, like we could talk about this for hours, but, I was talking to, a couple of the GMs in the NFL who are going through the process of trying to evaluate quarterbacks. And why has it been so hard for all of us to identify what quarterbacks are going to do well? It's probably the biggest question mark, like in the last 30 years of the NFL. And I really believe there's just so many things about the quarterback position that are unique. And it's been great to see him come up through it and be able to recognize that, so that even when these guys are coming to us now, there's certain things that we can recognize. And so it's been fun to go through the process with him. He's working really, really hard. He actually just went to a combine, ran 4.76, and like he's really coming into his own. He's put on about 20 pounds. So I'm excited to see what the spring looks like for him. But I know one day he's going to be a coach. So all this time is going to be very well spent.
So who's going to play quarterback for the Buckeyes? Who have you identified that will have success for the Buckeyes this fall?
Yeah. It's going to be, a new year. And I feel like, there's only been a couple times I've been here where we've had this conversation. Well, we have, an incumbent coming in, other than CJ and Justin in year 2, it's been the same way, So, we're in that same process of looking to figure out who that's going to be. I feel like Julian and Lincoln are ahead of Tavian right now. Tavian's got a lot of upside, but just a little bit behind, only having 15 practices. Julian has a year in the system, Lincoln 2. I said it the other day in the press conference, I feel like Lincoln was ahead of Julian going into the spring game, and I thought Julian had a better spring game than Lincoln. So it's back and forth. This summer is going to be important. I think they're all going to need each other. You're not dealing with, a 22, 23-year-old Will Howard who, can probably handle 16 games. And so I think they're all going to need each other. So we got to develop a great room there. And so we'll see how the summer shakes out.
Pete, you got a final question for the head coach of the Buckeyes before we let him go.
I do have a final question. With that quarterback conversation, you've had some big openers, and you had a little bit of a soft entry into the schedule last year. How does Texas sitting there week 1 add to the urgency, especially trying to place 14 guys drafted, 17 guys who went off to the NFL?
Yeah, the minute we saw that as the game 1, it has your attention. They're a very good team, very well coached. We knew coming off the field how much respect we had for them as a team. So we know it's going to be a bear. And so, I went down and visited Clemson with my son and spent a little time with Dabo. We talked about, the opener being Georgia for them last year and how like that preparation starts, in the summer, and that affects everything you do. It can make for a longer year for sure. But when you have a young team, you got to really be accurate in what you're doing because, you're not like dealing with an experienced team that you know what you're getting. There's a lot of things that still need to be answered in preseason camp. And you got to go into that game ready to go, tackling well. Like you said, last year, if we miss a few tackles in a couple of those games in game 1 or 2, you get it on film, you grow, and you build working into the next week. You can't afford to do that in the first week against Texas. I mean, you got to be on your game. So it certainly makes for a more amped up summer.
Who do you think will play quarterback for Texas?
I think they're
replacing their starter too, So.
Yeah. But it's going to be an exciting atmosphere for sure. Great for college football. I do think for us to play these styles of games, Arch Manning's a great quarterback and Texas does a great job. Sark does a great job. But for us to be motivated to play in these games moving forward, I feel like in the SEC and the Big Ten, we're going to need some more automatic qualifiers because if we don't, there's going to be less motivation to play these games. And I think they're great for college football. And by the way, I think they're great for our team as long as there are these automatic qualifiers because we can learn a lot about our team. But if it's going to be detrimental to getting into the playoffs late in the season, there'll be less motivation to play them.
100%. Ryan, you've been very generous with your time. We always enjoy talking to you. Thanks a lot for joining us and wish you well. Look forward to seeing you soon.
No problem. Thanks.
A Texas game for Ohio State as the opener. That'll be scintillating theater on probably a sweltering day in Columbus, Ohio. The debut of Arch Manning as the full-time starter. Whoever ends up starting, I would guess Julian Sayin, but Lincoln Kienholz has been challenging. He hasn't backed down from the challenge either way. He's right about that, Pete. The one thing we need is, and I'm still not quite there on the automatic qualifying piece of it, but I understand what he's saying. If it is a deterrent to playing games like this, can't have it. Got to have these games. Got to have Ohio State, Texas. You have to have LSU, Clemson, which we have. I know Florida State had a horrible season last year, but Alabama, Florida State. You've got to have those types of games outside of conference play. It's good for the sport.
Yeah, I just really, as the sport becomes more siloed, Rece, and it's hard to argue that it hasn't, we desperately need just like the cross data samples, right? Like we need to see what the best of leagues look like. We need to see what South Carolina and Virginia Tech look like. We need to see it at every turn and every level. And we've said this a bunch on this podcast. We don't root for teams. We don't root for results, but we will root for good games. And the system should not preclude or disincentivize teams from scheduling games like this. And, props to Chris Del Conte and Ross Bjork for keeping this game at a time when some of these games have gone on the chopping block.
Great visit with Ryan Day. We appreciate your listening. We encourage you to subscribe to the College Game Day podcast so you never miss an episode, or download wherever you prefer to get your podcast. And throughout the offseason, we'll continue to have big-name guests, Power 4 coaches, guys in new jobs here to talk about everything from who their starting quarterback's going to be to what they think of Adam Sandler's original work and tape. That's it for the College Game Day podcast. We'll talk to you next time.